Hello and welcome to another episode of the vAuto podcast. I'm Lance Helgeson with vAuto and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today I have Nathan Fox, Senior Director of Business Development at vAuto. Welcome, Nathan. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Lance. It's great to be here again today with you.
You bet. Now, Nathan, let's start by digging into what car shoppers and consumers and their buying behaviors and their expectations. How are these things shaping the way that dealers should merchandise their vehicles?
Well, Lance, I'll start with what probably sounds a little cliche sometimes, right? Which is everything's becoming more digital, whether it's, how we work, how we're entertaining ourselves, how we buy things. I think all of us can point to something we've done over the last, 3, 6, 12 months where we've made our lives more digital in some way, right? Mm-hmm. And the car industry is no exception to this. We see it every day within the industry. And so maybe let me point to a few facts that illustrate that. In the latest car buying study we did at Cox Automotive, we saw that approximately most consumers have spent approximately 7 hours shopping and researching cars online. Pretty strong indicator, right? That shopping's already moved to the digital world. I think we all kind of have that sense. I think what was more interesting in that study, though, was over 50% of the car buyers that we surveyed in that study said they only visited one dealership, which is a huge indication that they actually made the decision on which car they wanted to buy in the digital world before they step foot into the showroom. Mm-hmm. That's a huge move from where we've been historically. And then we've also seen this big uptick in the number of consumers or shoppers that are getting trade-in values from an online platform such as KBB ICO. Almost a third of shoppers now are actually getting a trade-in offer online. And so that transaction process is actually starting to move into the online world. And so to the second half of your question, Lance, what's that mean from a merchandising perspective? Well, I think dealers have to really think about how they produce incremental merchandising. I think they've done a really great job with things like photos, descriptions, having a price, kind of all the things you need to allow someone to shop. But I think they're a little insufficient when you come to some of these other things that people are now doing in the digital world. And so I'd really challenge dealers to look at how do they engage consumers? What do they provide to shoppers when they step foot into the showroom? And think about how can they use their merchandising to replicate some of that in the digital world.
So that I think dealers could certainly relate to the fact that a lot of their customers today, they know the car and they may have even started part of their deal, online. Mm-hmm. But as it relates to the behaviors and merchandising, Nathan, so what should dealers be focused on that can help them engage consumers the way you just noted when they look at their vehicles online?
Well, Lance, I think when you're looking to engage consumers, I think online, I think the answers are relatively simple for dealers, which is to focus on the photo carousel, or maybe more aptly described as the media carousel today, that you find on the BDP page. The reason I say that is I think we all know that visuals are extremely powerful, right? They're extremely the picture's worth 1,000 words analogy, right? And I actually just saw a study the other day from Intent Labs where 59% I think it was of consumers actually say that visuals are more powerful to them than text information, or more important to them. And we see that every day in the way that shoppers engage with the VDP page. If you look at dealer websites, 60% of visits to a VDP page involve engagement in the photo carousel. It's almost 4 times the engagement rate we see with most of the textual content on that page. And so shoppers are telling us this is where they get a lot of their information. But I think as dealers, we don't see dealers taking full advantage of that real estate. They do a great job getting photos into the photo carousel, but they're not really doing a lot to sell the vehicle, to provide ancillary content about that vehicle, or importantly, to convince a consumer that they should choose their dealership as the place to do business. And so I think dealers have a real opportunity to supercharge the VDP experience and the engagement on the VDP by focusing on high quality merchandising in the media carousel.
So what would you define as high quality merchandising in the carousel? I can speak for my own, even car buying. I once I understand, I've read the title of the car. I know what this car is. I just want to see it. So I'm in that carousel before I even look at anything else. But tell me a little bit more about what is high quality merchandising.
So it's interesting, Lance, as you're talking, right? I think we all know it when we see it. I certainly see it every day, probably more on products outside of the automotive industry, as far as what I would say is high quality merchandising. I think every time I see something where I'm like, man, that's a really great page, it has three things in common, which would be information, trust, and transparency would be the way I'd sort of sum them up. Maybe let me sort of dig deeper into each of those. So
Sure.
information, probably the most obvious one, which is making sure the information that the shopper needs to select that vehicle and know what's right for them is readily available. You know, simple example from another category. I was buying LED lights for my daughter's room, and the first page I looked at, I couldn't figure out how I spliced two together, and they never told me that. So I didn't actually buy that set of lights. Right? They didn't give me the information I needed to make a decision. Second is around trust, which I know a lot of people might be saying that's really difficult to build trust when I don't actually get to talk to someone or engage with someone. But I think shoppers are really accustomed to learning about retailers, learning about businesses online, and they want to know that that business is going to give them a positive shopping and buying experience. And so doing things like highlighting services the dealership's going to provide to them, focusing on ratings and reviews that are sort of testimonials that others have had positive experiences are all ways to start to build trust in an online world, even before you interact with that consumer in person. And then lastly, transparency. Shoppers today don't want surprises. They become confident when they know the good, bad, and the ugly, and they know exactly what they're getting and exactly what they're not getting. And so doing things that provide transparency about a vehicle, showcasing, if there is damage on a vehicle, or if there is something that the consumer should know that may not be perfect, but is really true about that vehicle is important.
I have another related question that
Sure.
I hear from dealers quite a bit, and that is, if I'm doing these things, how can I differentiate what I have from other dealers? Could you talk to that aspect of it as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to differentiate, in my mind, or one of the best places to differentiate, is back to where the consumer is. Right, the consumer is in that media carousel, and I'm sure you see this, Lance, if you go look at a number of different listings online. The majority of them probably have 25 plus photos. Dealers are doing a great job of putting high quality photos of a lot of different points of the car. But when I audit a lot of those listings, I found that it's usually less than 1 in 5 that have really put information that complements those photos after the hero image. So whether that be overlays that have content about the car, billboards that provide information about the dealership. Dealers are really missing that opportunity to provide more information to what is already a captured audience. The dealers worked hard to earn those eyeballs, and they're not really putting information in front of the consumer that can differentiate their dealership and their vehicle. I think another great way in that same sort of carousel, and you've kind of heard me kind of call it both a photo carousel and a media carousel.
Yeah.
I think the photo carousel is maybe the old way of looking at it. If you think about it as a media carousel, most listing sites and websites allow you to put rich media like 360-degree spins or videos in. I think that's another great way to really boost that transparency and trust by putting richer media that shows that you're really trying to connect with and show to the shopper exactly what you're trying to sell. And so, these are all the reasons why at vAuto we've started to build new tools like Intelligent Promotion and Snapplot 360.
Let's take a closer look at them. Start with Intelligent Promotion, Nathan. What are the high level key points that folks should know?
It's kind of as simple as you build a promotion with high quality content, and then you let the intelligence of the tool apply that to all the right vehicles. And so as a dealer gets into this product, what they're going to find is we've built a set of filters within Intelligent Promotion where they can create groups of inventory based upon their strategy. Simple example would be creating, new car inventory, CPO inventory, and used inventory, right? And filtering on mechanisms like that. And then a dealer for each of those groups would configure a promotion, which is kind of a template of what they want to put into each of those merchandise profiles. And we've given them lots of tools within Intelligent Promotion, image overlays, text overlays, billboards, smart fields, all these ways that they can surface incremental content into the merchandising carousel and tell a better story about that vehicle. As I said, kind of as I started describing this, the really cool part is once they sort of configure that template for that group of inventory, the system is smart enough that it can actually pull the information that's needed for each vehicle and apply it to the right set of vehicles. And of course, all this is directly powered from within vAuto, so it fits seamlessly into the workflows that dealers are already using today.
You mentioned a term in there, smart fields. What are the smart fields there and billboards, and how do those relate to the storytelling you were talking about?
Sure. Yeah, smart fields are something that probably nobody's really heard of before, but think about it as a way to insert specific information about a vehicle into an overlay without having to manually code that in. Probably easier to illustrate it with an example or explain it in more detail, right? If I have a set of CPO vehicles and I want to highlight on each of those, call it 20 vehicles that they have the odometer, the mileage, I can use the odometer smart field and put that onto an overlay for that set of 20 vehicles. And then the smart field is going to automatically pull the exact odometer reading for each individual vehicle and layer that in. So it would say, 5,276 miles. It really takes all that work out of the dealer having to manually code that information in. And so you can imagine the power of those and how that starts to really begin to automate some of the things that dealers either chose not to do or had to do manually. And then the other one I think you mentioned, Lance, was billboards.
Yep.
Back to your question earlier about how does a dealership differentiate themselves? Billboards is almost a secret weapon in doing that, I think, within intelligent promotion. Billboards is a functionality that allows dealers to insert an unlimited number of supplemental images into the photo carousel. And a supplemental image is, in essence, a tile or a slide that has information on it. And some examples could include, why buy here billboards. So highlighting services of a dealership. It can include information about CPO programs to tell and explain to a consumer or a shopper what the benefits are of buying CPO. In today's environment with all of the inventory challenges, it can talk about the dealer's process for paying top dollar for trades. And so it's a great way for a dealership to surface information that sets them apart from the next dealership over. It's interesting. I think dealers actually do this today in some places. If you look at a lot of dealerships' websites, there's the slider at the top of the website, and they're already putting this type of content there. Billboards are a way to surface that in front of another set of eyeballs that the dealer has already captured within the listings platforms.
That's interesting. Now, I think you may have answered this question already, but on one hand, it sounds like that's more new stuff, that a dealer has to worry about. And part of me thinks, well, maybe that's more work, but it sounds like there's some efficiency built in here. So do we have a sense, Nathan, of if I'm doing what might be the basics today, and I spend X amount of time doing that, and then I have this system, which I understand, as you noted, there's a little setup. You gotta spend the time to set it up. But how does that time spent to do these things and tell the better story you described play out with this tool?
Well, I think one of the things about the tool, Lance, is it's highly flexible. And so, I think dealers can kind of choose how actively they want to manage it. As you said, right, like any new tool comes with a bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a setup. But I think for some dealers, they may choose to take this tool and establish what I'd call a few fixed or evergreen promotions. The four that probably are the most obvious is one for new car, for each nameplate that they sell, for CPO cars, for used cars, and coming soon. And you can kind of imagine for each of those how you tell a slightly different story, right? You would talk about different things about the brand versus about your, reconditioning program versus CPO benefits, right? You could layer in different content to each of those. And once you set those up, those are promotions you really don't have to do a whole lot to touch. And so then you can imagine, a car hits your inventory, you take your 25 photos, and you have to do nothing else. All that content's automatically applied, right? And so a little upfront time, and you get a tremendous lift, I think, for boost in your overall merchandising. Conversely, I think some dealers may find that, hey, there's actually enough value that I want to go in and actively manage some of these promotions. And so In that case, they may start to tailor some of those base promotions to specific market situations that arise. Sometimes examples are helpful, right? So if I've already set up my new car promotion for all of my Ford cars, and all of a sudden the OEM drops a great rebate on a specific model, perhaps it's the Explorer, I could go in and take that existing campaign that I have, duplicate it, refine the filters so it's only applying to the Ford Explorer, and add content about that incentive to that promotion, and add incremental information with, which was frankly a couple of clicks, right? And then that's all cascaded out across, all 20 Ford Explorers that dealership has in stock. And so I think for some dealers, they may find that more active management, has a tremendous value. And so, what I would say on this point, Lance, I think a lot of dealers aren't doing this at all today because it's so much work today. They just choose to kind of skip this step, right? And they sort of stop at just putting the photos out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so given this flexibility and intelligent promotion, my hope is that we find, more and more dealers are able to really take advantage of the photo carousel and its completeness, and really win more shoppers.
It's interesting as I'm listening, Nathan, and thinking in my mind about, how a carousel might look or change, for let's call it the average dealer. It does seem like that's the kind of stuff that like Carvana, Vroom, and others are already doing. So in my mind, I guess that it feels like this could be the price of entry, or a point of entry into what it might be the next phase of digital retailing.
I think you're absolutely right there, Lance. I certainly see dealers in the market doing this, not just the new form dealers, right? Obviously, they probably led the way because of, they're starting with sort of a digital transaction and working backwards. But
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of traditional brick and mortar dealers starting to adopt this mindset as well, which I think is a pretty strong signal that there's a pretty big shift occurring in our marketplace, right? In the way that cars are bought and sold in the retail world. Digital car buying is really becoming part of our industry. I think it's moved from being, in that really sort of early innovator stage to, it's about to cross the chasm, if you want to use that old analogy. And to that point, here at Cox, we think this is such an instrumental sort of part of the industry in the future that, we're focused as an organization on helping to lead the way in digital retail transactions. And we have teams, across our organization collaborating to create, customer preferred platforms that enable digital car buying. And I truly believe that by providing the right tools to dealers for this environment, things like vAuto Intelligent Promotion and SnapLot 360, that we can make selling cars more profitable for dealers, and at the same time, make the consumer buying experience easier, faster, and just frankly better.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lance. Thanks for having me today.
You bet. And thanks to all of you for watching this podcast episode. Until next time, stay well.